Okay, so Paula, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. I know that what you've got to say is going to be valuable for the students at the university. My first question is just to ask you to introduce yourself for the students. Tell me how the Civic Innovation Office started and why the City of Toronto decided to set it up.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for having me be a part of this course for your students. My name is Paula Kwan. I'm the director of the Civic Innovation Office here at the City of Toronto. The Civic Innovation Office was created to help improve the quality of lives for the residents of Toronto by bringing a new approach to solving complex challenges that are affecting the lives of Torontonians. We're bringing a fresh approach and a fresh set of eyes to the way that the city tackles big challenges by reframing the way that the problems are taken a look at, as well as rethinking what the solutions might look like. The Mayor's Office actually applied for the grant from Bloomberg Philanthropies last year. We were the first Canadian city to have received the 3-year grant from Bloomberg. So our office is about halfway through our journey right now, but the City of Toronto saw a need for this type of approach to how they address service and policy within the city, and we were lucky enough to find Bloomberg as an enabler to that.
Thank you, Paula. And what's your background? How did it prepare you for this role?
Well, I guess I've always been curious about people as individuals and people interacting with each other in society. My background, I did a double degree at Laurier in psychology and sociology, and I kind of like happenstance got into the tech sector here in Toronto right after graduation. So that started me on about a 10-year journey in the startup tech world, starting in Toronto, spending a lot of time in San Francisco and the Valley, as well as other innovation pockets around the world based off of that. And then about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, I was asked to help as an external tech advisor to a division here at the City Parks Recreation and Forestry, and they just wanted to get my thoughts on how they could tackle a technical problem that they were having. And that was like my first entry point to working within the city alongside people here. And when this opportunity came up for a director of the office, I think that my background in just human-centered design, problem solving at scale, building something from 0 to 1, and tackling challenges in a lean and agile way with very tight timelines and oftentimes little budget helped me prepare me for this role.
Wonderful. And how are you bringing these new perspectives and approaches to city government?
Well, in our office, one of our core values is show, don't tell. So our approach to bringing these approaches to the city is to literally bring people into our office. It's workshopping alongside them. It's really understanding their challenges, their questions, their projects from them in a deep and meaningful way. So what we avoid trying to do sometimes is, just telling them about things or lecturing. We really want to bring them into our space or go straight into theirs, work with some of their end users or their target audiences, and try to provide some either advisory services or consulting services in that way. But we do believe in workshops, training, getting our hands dirty into addressing some challenges for them, and that's I'm seeing our aha moments that light up when they come into our space and go into our whiteboard room. Though when we ask them the certain type of questions, I think they oftentimes come in here thinking we're going to give them answers right away, but instead I think we ask more questions than we do telling them the answers. Again, our core values are show, don't tell, and make time to listen. So I think those are two key approaches.
Thank you. Can you tell me about any examples of how this has been done elsewhere in the world, or is Toronto an innovator in this area?
Yeah, well actually Toronto, I'm pretty surprised to see the amount of innovation that was actually already happening at the City of Toronto before we came in. It's also important to note that I don't believe that innovation is necessarily always a digital or technical solution. They can be workflow process improvements or policy refinements here. That's what I've learned from my time here. So the city's been doing some really interesting things. If I think about municipal licensing, I did not know that they had a proof of concept for part of their project on blockchain. So they had rolled that out, I think late last year, and it was a pilot and a quick POC to get that up and going. The Toronto Water actually utilized drones, submarines, as well as AR to help them perform the services that they need to in a safe and cost-effective way. So those are Toronto's doing some really, really cool things around that. From a Bloomberg perspective, we are part of a network and plugged right in as the first Canadian city within a cohort of about, I think, 29 to 30 different cities around the world, primarily in the US. And we've seen things from addressing crime rate and murder reduction like they did in New Orleans, to addressing the affordable housing challenges in Boston. We've seen examples of better diversity in the recruiting process in the LAPD in LA, all the way through to Tel Aviv and Beersheba in Israel, who have taken a look at better ways to address litter problems in a community, as well as social isolation for senior citizens. So the realm of possibility is big, but the idea there is tackling big civic challenges that are affecting the lives of residents.
Yeah, good things to do. Mm-hmm. Your office is focused on civic innovation. How do you make innovation happen in a large municipality like Toronto?
Well, the saying that comes to mind for this question is we think big, but act small. And this is something that I actually learned quite well in the private sector, in the tech space, where you're trying to address a big, complex challenge, and instead of trying to boil the ocean and try to solve for everyone, you solve for a few people first. Live their experience, you identify the problem, and focus on that, deeply understand the problem from their perspective first. Therein, you bring in smart people in partnerships, people who work directly with with the end users, and you bring in the residents in our case, or end users, into the process to design and co-develop and co-build what that solution may be. Because at the end of the day, if you bring them into into the process and you learn from them and you're there to ask those questions and prompt when needed, you'll oftentimes get a better result and a better solution that is more aligned and more likely to address their need, as opposed to other ways of doing it. There's also lean and agile practices that allow you to test your hypotheses with those people during the development phase, so that you always go back, you're building, you're measuring, you're learning, and you're iterating very, very quickly. So yeah, those are the processes that we're bringing to tackle these challenges.
Okay, what role does the tech community have in this? How can they contribute, and how might they benefit?
We're very, very lucky, and I think I've got a unique look into the tech sector in the KW corridor as well as in Toronto. We do not have a lack of talented, smart, passionate, driven people in this area who are coming up with great ideas, interesting products to solve real challenges with people. So we're here to harness that as well. So we see ourselves as a bridge between innovators, both inside and outside of city government. So here we've got tons of challenges that are affecting the lives of residents. And what the tech and innovation community have are a lot of solutions. So our office is here to bridge that gap at times when we need to, but we're also there to learn from the tech and innovation community as well. I love to go to meetups and events and just meet people and hear what they're up to. It gives us a really good pulse on what's happening in the industry as well. So when I hear about municipal licensing having this proof of concept on blockchain, I now also have a group of people in the innovation community who are also trying to do the same things and potentially trying to help the city address some of their needs, and there's oftentimes real needs there as well. So we're there to learn from the innovation community, connect when needed, and to bring them in to help teach us what's happening out there, and vice versa, having the city teach them what would help improve the lives of residents.
What might the initiative mean for the delivery of services in the city? What changes might we expect for residents?
So, as I mentioned, the Bloomberg grant is here for 3 years, so we don't have a lot of time to pilot or play out a challenge for us. So ideally, on a 3-year grant, you're going to address about 3 different challenges. So we're about to head into one for the remainder of this year. What that means is we're going to tackle a specific target population. The city does a great job, and they are here to serve as all the residents of Toronto. But for our project, we're going to look at a sliver of a target population or a focus community that is related to our project, and we're going to actually deeply understand the problem from their perspective and use some creative problem-solving techniques to address for them, in hopes that when we get through ideation and prototyping, when we have a working prototype, again, may not be digital, it may be a better workflow process. When we identify what those positive results are from the prototyping phase, we hope to then take those and scale them out to other communities, other populations, other fill in the blank, to help, and then continue to learn from that process there. So again, it's this whole idea of thinking big, acting small with what we can chew off. And then taking those learnings and applying them and scaling them elsewhere. So we're going to be focusing on a target population in hopes that we can, spread those learnings to improve the lives of many more at scale.
Your office, and you've mentioned this, is funded by and works with Bloomberg Philanthropies. Can you tell me about that relationship and how it benefits the city?
Right. So we feel the support of Bloomberg Philanthropies. We have regular calls with them. We are plugged into the network of innovation teams, or I-teams as they call them, around the world. We have a Slack group with lots of colorful channels around design thinking, media hits and press, so that we can actually learn from one another. Some of the ways that we've benefited, our team and our city has benefited from their support is, a lot of the times, they have teams just like ours trying to tackle big civic challenges across cities around the world. So when I hear about similar projects or receive questions that are related to a project that another innovation team has done, oftentimes I connect them, or I ask for more information from those innovation teams and I share them here. We have a very open and transparent community, so there's no lack of sharing and asking for help. So it's just a matter of, city staff may come to me and say, hey, I've got this idea, or do you know of any other city who's maybe tried improving infrastructure with sensors? And immediately I'm like, yeah, that's what Syracuse did, and we facilitated a call. We've had questions from Toronto Police Services like, hey, how have there been any other police services who have embarked in this journey of innovation? I immediately pointed them to LA as well as Baltimore. So having those external reference points for our city is really helpful. But with that being said, we take those learnings back, and Toronto is the 4th largest city in North America. We have a very, very diverse population, so those learnings come back and we make it work for us, and that's where we come in as well.
Very valuable. What guidance do you have for other organizations that wish to become more innovative? Where should they start?
I've been asked this question actually quite often lately, and the one piece of advice that I would give them, again, my background coming from their perspective, coming from the world of private sector, startup and technology, something that has really opened my eyes in this role is the role of accessibility to users. So I fully understand, like before I had this role, I fully understood that there's end users in mind, and you can build out an accessibility plan after you get your first few versions out. But my perspective and opinion of that has changed dramatically since joining this role. I would say that the business plan and a business case should always have accessibility for all users, people with, for the visually impaired, AODA compliance, built right into the business case, as opposed to an accessibility strategy. It's all the same thing. That you can read articles about how websites and products that are AODA compliant are actually produce better SEO results. Like, it is advantageous to provide that, and there is very little to no risk in providing a product that is accessible to a wide and broad view of people with potential challenges to access a product. So that's what the city's here for, and I get asked this a lot to review products, and the first thing I ask is this AODA compliant? Or what kind of checkpoints have you made to make sure that this is accessible for a broader audience and broader user base? And it often comes as an afterthought, which is unfortunate. And so my advice has been now to make sure that founders and people that are coming up with a product or an idea, make sure we make it accessible for all, because we're leaving a large population who are oftentimes in different circumstances than us to have challenges accessing their product.
Great advice. And my final question is that for students who are entering the workplace today, who want to contribute to innovation in their organizations, do you have any advice for them on that'll help them as they do this?
I do. I can think of two things. One is telling the students that they are the change, that you are the innovation. When you graduate and come into an organization, whether or not you realize it, you're seen as the next generation. You have experiences, and oftentimes I see a lot of students come out who had never actually lived in a world before the internet. But in the reality, in many workplaces, especially large, complex organizations like this one, there are a lot of people who, including myself, who knew of an age before the internet. So understand that your perspectives and your experiences with technology especially, but also your view of the world, is a new, fresh way to look at challenges and to think through solutions, which can be intimidating for some. So be patient with those folks. I think of myself when I first learned how to use a MacBook in my last role. I remember it vividly, and I happened to be, I was too scared to ask for help because it was a standard issue MacBook and everybody had one and everyone was using Gmail and Drive, and I remember sitting there too afraid to ask for help, but luckily I was seated beside a millennial. He was in his early 20s, and he was patient there, and he answered all my questions, and as ridiculous as they were and basic as they were, he really took his time and taught me the ropes of using all those modern services at the time. The second piece of advice I would give is to make sure we share the experiences and perspectives of, again, the broad range of people that we're trying to serve, especially at the city, and especially if you're thinking about getting into government. I'm a big proponent of the civic tour of duty. So if you think of internships, co-ops, volunteer placements, or even contract work with the city, I think it's so valuable to spend time in the role of a public servant, and I think it's only for the better. There's so much value in seeing what municipal people and people who are trying to serve communities are trying to do, and it is not easy. But it's such an important perspective to have, because you really do get a more refined view of the world. If you don't decide to stay in government, that's okay, but that perspective, that value, that empathy really does follow on, and I can say that from experience. Like, when we're here for 3 years, we'll figure out what happens. This is my civic tour of duty, and I've learned so much from just the year that I've been here.
Thank you very much for talking to me today, Paula, and talking, of course, to the students at the University of Waterloo. I know they're going to gain value from it, not least from your answer to the final question about advice directly for them. But thank you for taking the time to do this interview today.
Thank you, Peter.